Right, let's get straight into it. Let's just begin. And to begin, I need to introduce you to my sister. There she is. 9 years ago, she introduced me to one of the greatest unsung inventions of the 20th century. This, folks, is a menstrual cup. It's a little thing, but it's a big deal. For those of you who don't know, menstrual cups are an ingenious alternative to pads or tampons. They're made of soft, medical-grade silicone, and the remarkable thing about them is that they're reusable, and each one lasts for 10 years. I've used mine for the last 9 years, so I can't vouch for what happens when you get to year 10. Do they spontaneously combust? Do they self-destruct? I don't know. I really hope not. But what I do know is that for the 9 years since I've started using one of these things, my quality of life and my well-being both improved. I found it to be way more comfortable, way more convenient, and way more reliable than anything I'd ever used before. And I love the fact that it saved me a lot of money. We're talking about close to $1,000 so far and counting. I've still got a year to go. So not long after I started using a menstrual cup all those years ago, I got to thinking, and I thought, hang on a minute. First thing, why was I 27 when I discovered this thing for the first time? What's going on with that? And the second thing I thought was, if this little thing could make such a kind of noticeable, such a discernible difference to my life within the confines of my relatively, let's face it, pampered and privileged existence in London, it could potentially be a game changer in parts of the world where women, girls, and anybody else who menstruates doesn't have it quite so easy. And I didn't have to look very far to get my first kind of clues. I mean, did you know, for example, that in Malawi, more school days are missed by girls as a result of menstruation than because of malaria? Now, cue my mother. There she is. My mother's from Malawi, and she's one of those girls that miss school. My mother is not at all from a middle class or wealthy or well-to-do background. She was the 10th of 10 children. She grew up in rural Malawi. Her family, when she was growing up, really struggled. There wasn't always enough money to put food on the table. There wasn't enough money always to pay school fees. She got her first pair of shoes, age 15, which incidentally is also when she got her first period. But anyway, for her, when she was 15 and she got her period, the option of commercially available menstrual products was not something that was in her sights. Even if they were available where she lived, she wouldn't have been able to afford them. So she told me about how she used to manage using strips of cloth. And these strips of cloth were neither reliable, certainly not comfortable, or there being a noticeable smell, which meant everybody knew she was on her period, which in her culture was seen as a hugely shameful thing. So every single month for her, through her adolescence, she had to deal every month, with humiliation, embarrassment, discomfort, those cloth things. I don't have time to tell you all about that, but using one of those cloths is definitely something that you don't want to experience. It was ordinary for her to just be stressed out and anxious when she's on her period. That's just the way it was. Now, for me, it was, I guess, a process of connecting my own experience when I started using a menstrual cup at 27 with my mother's experience through puberty that led me to decide, okay, I'm going to found the Cup Effect. Now, the Cup Effect is a not-for-profit charitable NGO and social enterprise. Basically, our mission is to raise awareness about menstrual cups and make them more widely available. We sell them in affluent markets, and we use the income we make from doing that to support our work to distribute them in low-income communities around the world. We've got projects in Kenya, Malawi, and in the UK, remote rural locations, urban slum settings, one in a refugee camp, and in the UK we work with refugees, asylum seekers, and food bank users also. The other thing that obviously is a big part of what we do is raise awareness, spread the word. Let's just examine the reasons why the Cup Effect's mission is worthwhile from a bigger picture, from a macro perspective. And I find a helpful way to do that is to explore the significance of some numbers. Why not? Let's play with some numbers. Most of you probably don't give it much thought. That's normal. I certainly didn't until I started doing this work. But menstruation is ubiquitous. It is everywhere. It is going on all the time. It is going on in this room. From puberty to menopause, a woman may be on her period for up to 3,000 days. That equates to 8 years of her life. And then, across the world, at any given moment, there are 800 million people on their period at any time. And a significant proportion of those 800 million live in poverty or other unfavorable circumstances, such as refugee camps or prisons, perhaps. So, just those two basic considerations, I think, demonstrate that there's a lot of people out there who could benefit from the option, and the word option is super important here, from the option of using a menstrual cup, or knowing about a menstrual cup at the very least. Let's go a little deeper. Let's consider and give some thought to schoolgirls. Studies have shown that in some of the world's lowest income communities, girls who are enrolled in school will be absent up to 20% of the time as a direct result of their period. 1 day a week's a lot of time to be off school. Really is. And so there we are with this situation, 20% of the time, 1 day a week off school. I don't know, for me, the more I looked into this, the more I started to think, I couldn't kind of let it go. And so I explored a little further, and I explored a little further. And when I was in Kenya a couple of years ago doing some of the groundwork and a bit of research for the Cup Effect, I got talking to some girls, and these are girls who can't afford menstrual products, and they explained to me how they make it work every month, how they manage. And they manage by improvising. Some of them use cloth, like my mother did. Some of them use feathers, some of them use mattress stuffing, some of them use leaves, some of them use newspaper, whatever's available. And I don't think it takes much imagination to understand or to interpret that those alternatives are ineffective, uncomfortable, and come with potential health risks if you got no choice but to opt for that. There's also a much darker and more sinister side to this equation. I mean, I've heard horrible stories about girls in slum communities in Nairobi who find themselves in a situation where they're selling sex in exchange for pads. That really goes on. We've got a situation where opportunistic, predatory older men have understood that a lot of girls who need these items can't afford them, and so they exploit that need, exploit that situation. In 2018, we have a scenario where, in some cases, menstrual products have replaced cash as a currency that can be used to buy sex from vulnerable, often underage girls from poor backgrounds. And let's be very clear, when we're talking about underage girls, we're actually not talking about sex, we're talking about rape and child abuse. Now for me, I just felt like I couldn't just pretend that I didn't know about that, or that it wasn't going on. But I also want to say, just let's bring it down to earth a little, I do have some perspective. I know that menstrual cups are not a solution to all of society's problems. I know that menstrual cups are not going to bring about world peace on their own. But I got to thinking that actually, if it was possible to enable even one of those girls to be in a situation where she can make a different choice when confronted by one of those, predatory, sexual predators, that's got to be worth something. That was my thought process. And as if all that wasn't enough, I'm not done yet, as if all that wasn't enough, There's another angle to this, which makes the case for why, we all, everybody, and I really mean all when I say everybody, have a stake in this. Over the course of her life, a woman will use up to 12,000 pads or tampons over the course of her life. That equates to about 150 kgs worth of waste. A significant proportion of that, if we're talking about pads, is plastic waste. That's how come a lot of them are made to be waterproof. And we're talking about, volume-wise, about 2 minibuses worth per person. And obviously, that's got to be dealt with, it's got to be disposed of, it's going to end up being incinerated, perhaps burnt, sent to landfill, or sloshing up on beaches across the globe. That's an angle to this. And I think this is significant because menstruation is often seen as, or pigeonholed as, oh, a women's issue. Over there, put it over there, with the women's issues, yeah? But actually, if we're talking about an environmental impact, and we're looking at things at a macro level, it's something we all have a stake in. And I think it's important to kind of make that point. Now, those are the headlines. That kind of sets the scene, and I think makes a pretty strong case for why menstrual cups make sense. But I feel at this point I should let you know that menstrual cups are by no means a new innovation. They've been around since the 1930s. If these things are such a good idea, and they've been around for so long, why does hardly anybody know about them? Because it's true, hardly anybody knows about them. And, the answer to that question is very, very simple. Menstrual cups are a terrible business idea, one of the worst business ideas ever. Think about it. I sell you a menstrual cup, I've lost you as a customer for a decade. I mean, imagine going on, I don't know, Dragon's Den, or trying to pitch that business idea to some venture capitalists or some investors. They're going to laugh in your face. There's no incentive for the big multinationals that produce the products we use month on month to add menstrual cup to their product line. Not a single one of them has a version of a menstrual cup on their product line. Of course they don't. They're manufactured by small organizations, small companies. Quite a lot of small companies as it happens, but nonetheless, little minnows, yeah? And I mean, I think when you have that perspective on it, it's pretty clear that I'm not doing this for the money. So why am I? And what would success look like for me and for the cup effect in 10 years from now? What I want to see happen is a shift. I want to see a situation where, my experience isn't the norm. I discovered these damn things when I was 27 years old. And I realized that up until that point, my ideas about my body and my ideas about my period were kind of shaped and defined in very prescribed ways that were really a lot to do with taboo, stigma, shame, and messages, mainly, I wasn't aware, but via advertising, that resulted in my ideas about how to manage my period every month were shaped by somebody's profit motive. They were not shaped by what might be better for me, might be more comfortable for me, might save me a lot of money and ultimately be better for the planet. So I kind of want to create a movement that it offers a counter-narrative to that. And then, in practical terms, what we should be heading for is a situation where everybody knows about menstrual cups. Base 1. Base 2. People are aware from a young age. 11 years old, why not? From a young age, people are aware of the benefits of them and also have access to them at a price they can afford. I'm trying to do that in a small way through the cup effect, but this needs to be, if it's going to have the impact it ought to, a much bigger thing. And I think it's super important actually to pause and say, informed choice is mission critical to what we do and what we're trying to do. Not here at all to impose menstrual cups on anybody, no. Not here to criticize people or shame people who prefer to use other products, absolutely not. This is just about creating a scenario where they're not this weird thing that is kind of out there on the side. It's just an option that everyone's aware of and that everybody has access to. I mean, it really does kind of drive me nuts that it's 45 years since my mother got her first period, yeah? And in that time, we put people on the moon, yeah? We've put people on the moon, yet there are still hundreds of millions of girls and women around the world that are being held back by something that's so natural, such a basic part of being a human being. I just think it's, I mean, yeah, let me say it. I think it's kind of unconscionable. You know what I mean? Yeah. What we're trying to do is important because it's at the intersection of several agendas. And we don't think about it enough, hardly at all. But it's at the intersection of several agendas. I've already said, you know, it makes sense from an environmental standpoint. That's great. That's almost the easiest argument to make. It makes sense from a social and gender justice perspective as well. But then, you know, for the mercenary among us, there is a macroeconomic imperative also. Just think about it. Across the world, the billions of dollars being pumped into educating girls. That's how you uplift communities out of poverty. Come on, let's do that. And I'm all for that. And yet, there's a situation where, hang on a minute, all of us who are part of the narrative of money being invested in these things for lots of very good reasons, are not seeing optimized returns. Because the thing that we're a little bit too embarrassed to talk about, so have been for several decades, improving slightly, is overlooked. It's very simply overlooked. And I think we can do a little better. I mean, this is actually an optimistic talk because, you know, there is a way around it. And I want to kind of end with a quote from a brilliant woman. She is a, you know, legendary academic and civil rights activist. And one of the things she said once upon a time was that she's no longer accepting the things she cannot change, she's changing the things she cannot accept. That's Angela Davis. And so the message really is, you know, there is extraordinary in some of the most mundane things, but it's a matter of kind of being vigilant and looking for that extraordinary. And we have it all in us to look at our own experiences. You don't have to look at some of the bad things that have happened. You can sometimes look at the good things. For me, discovering a menstrual cup was a good thing, and from that, I saw an avenue to do something that would have, you know, a significant impact. And I think we all have the possibility to kind of tread a path in that kind of way. Thank you very much.